Be here today with Marc Shedroff, who is the Vice President of the Samsung Open Innovation Center here in Silicon Valley. And he's also leading the launch of a pair of accelerators, one here in Palo Alto and one in New York City. So before joining Samsung, Marc was a business development guy at several startups, including Pulse News, Cool Iris, and Peel. And he also previously served as head of entertainment and sports partnerships at YouTube. So we're here to talk about these new initiatives at Samsung and to get a better idea of what Samsung is looking for in the companies that it's investing in and partnering with. So to start off, Marc, why don't you give us a sort of broad overview of the Samsung Open Innovation Center and what you're looking to do here?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me. And one commercial announcement is Cool Iris. When I got here, it turns out they're presenting in the alley, so I guess I'll give an endorsement for them as a former colleague. Anyway, back to Samsung. So I joined Samsung about 18 months ago, and about 9 months ago, we created this group called the Open Innovation Center. My boss, David Unn, runs the Open Innovation Center globally, and the focus of the group is really around how do we embed ourselves in software services in Silicon Valley in New York. We're headquartered here in Silicon Valley. We have an office in New York City, and we have 4 groups that help us partner in the broadest sense of the word with companies in Silicon Valley in New York. The first is a commercial partnerships group. So most notably, recently we worked on the Galaxy Gear launch, so the Smartwatch. So that would be the first group. The second group is an early stage investment fund. We invest $500,000 to $3 million in companies, Series A and seed stage, again, US focused. The third group is an M&A team focused on small talent acquisitions, again, of US-based software companies. Most notably, we were very instrumental in driving the Boxy acquisition along with our visual display unit, which is the TV group. And then the last group, which I think we'll probably get into more as we go, are these accelerators, which are really product development units within Open Innovation Center, which are designed to attract top entrepreneurial talent, both in Silicon Valley as well as New York, to build products on behalf of Samsung.
So these accelerators are pretty brand new. The one here is just a few months old, and you just this month launched in New York, so we expect to hear more about them as time goes on. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts behind the accelerators and how they're structured?
Sure. So we opened the Palo Alto one, which is, by the way, the old, I'm misoriented from where I am, but on University Avenue, the old Borders bookstore, we took the second floor there. We opened that office in June, although it had some teams up and running since February. And then the New York office, as Joanna mentioned, just opened. We had our launch party on Monday. We have a handful of teams in each office. And what we decided when we looked out at accelerators, incubators, product development labs really around the country was, what's the main problem that we, Samsung, can solve for these entrepreneurs? And we really think it was 2 things. One is distribution has gotten very, very hard. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's, hundreds of thousands of apps in each app store, very hard to get discovered. And so proximity to Samsung, executives, access to APIs, but most importantly, access to distribution, we thought was really critical. The other thing, which is just a funny observation when you look at startups in general, is that founders end up spending a lot of their time on administrative elements of running their startup. So when does my lease run out for my office? Do I have health care for my employees? 401k, vision service plan, whatever all those things might be. I hired a remote employee in Florida. How do I pay state taxes there? And so what we've done is we've said, come to Samsung. Let's give you proximity to our devices, proximity to executives, and become part of the company. And at the same time, instead of spending 40% of your time or whatever it would be working on the product, we'll instead spend 90 or 95% of the time, because everything else that's the overhead. By the way, one thing I didn't mention, fundraising. They don't fundraise. So for entrepreneurs who are going to spend half of their time out raising money, they don't do that because Samsung is basically the sole investor in that company.
So what are some examples of the kinds of companies that you're looking to work with in the accelerators?
Sure. So to be super clear about, there's two ways that people enter the accelerator, or teams enter the accelerator. One is as individuals, right? These are employment agreements. So we meet an interesting entrepreneur. That entrepreneur is very excited about the value proposition that Samsung Accelerator would offer. And we talk to them about usually a set of 2 or 3 ideas that are interesting to them. We also want to make sure that they're interesting to us, right? And by us, I don't mean Open Innovation Center, I really mean Samsung, because Samsung ultimately is where we want these products to be, whether it's on our TVs or our televisions, or TVs, mobile phones, tablets. The other way that groups could come into the accelerators through an acquisition. So we might acquire a company, instead of doing it in conjunction with a business unit, the way we did Boxy, they might actually enter the accelerator first and become a part of those teams, really be cocooned in a way from mother Samsung, or the big company, and really continue to work in the way that they're used to working as a startup.
Right, you had that nice goldfish metaphor for that. I just
so,
like this.
So the story I was saying before we came in here is, I think of it when I was little. Every once in a while I'd buy a goldfish, or my parents would buy me a goldfish. And you can't take a goldfish and open the bag and pour it in the water, because the temperatures usually aren't the same. So what you do is you stick the bag in the water, the temperature's equal, and then you dump the fish in the water. In a funny way, I think it's a little bit the same thing if we're going to do an acquisition of a small team. I think it makes a lot of sense to put them in our accelerator, because again, it's like putting the goldfish in the bag of water. You're not throwing them into big Samsung dealing with, forget about if the processes and the decision we make are good or bad. I assume they're good because we're having a ton of success. But for a team that's been 6 people making decisions autonomously, working late at night, ordering pizza, sleeping on their desk if they need to, the accelerator is honestly a better environment as step 1 than a more corporate environment.
Another question, we associate Samsung with hardware. You're the world's largest smartphone and mobile phone seller currently, and of course other devices, tablets, TVs, et cetera. But looking at your partnerships and areas of interest for investments, it seems like there's a strong software focus. Yeah. And I was curious if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so Open Innovation Center, I think if I failed to say it earlier, we're exclusively focused on software. We will get involved in some hardware things from time to time, but it's generally what is the software layer that's going to run on top of our devices. And we do believe in Open Innovation Center, certainly, that Samsung is an amazing hardware company, but in the future, the winners are going to be companies that combine hardware and software in a thoughtful way to provide the best consumer experience. And for us, we do have this kind of fortunate perch right now where we sell the most phones in the world, we sell the most TVs in the world, and so the notion is, if you can not only connect those phones and TVs and tablets to the internet, but you can start to connect them to each other. We own the world's biggest platform to distribute content, services, advertising, things like that.
What would be an example of a partnership that gave a software provider some access to this tremendous platform?
Yeah, so I mean, I would go back to the Galaxy Gear product, the smartwatch that we were just involved in. We went out to a set of very select partners, said we're launching this new piece of hardware with all of the marketing muscle and technology muscle of Samsung behind it. And we brought 30 partners to the launch in Berlin as a first version of the product. And that to me, a lot of those partnerships are going to be the differentiators on top of that smartwatch. I mean, the smartwatch is beautiful, but it's going to be what can you actually do with that product, which is going to differentiate it.
So what might be an example of some of the functionality that would make this a desirable device?
The smartwatch?
Yeah.
So, look, it's the first version. I think a lot of it's around notifications. It's the ability to snap a picture from your wrist. It's a lot of things that there's a lot of interest around wearables today. We're going to see a lot of different things. There's the Google Glass. We've obviously done a watch to start. So I think you're going to see it as, like we announced, it's a companion device to the Note 3. And it's really for things like notifications. There was a big focus on health to start as well.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to throw out on my factoid collection prior to this discussion. Samsung, according to Wikipedia, is currently the world's largest IT company in terms of revenue. So there's certainly a lot of muscle behind this operation. So that brings me to my next question, just to provide a little clarification. Samsung also has a venture arm that makes a number of venture investments, including in US tech companies. And I'm interested, how is that differentiated from the Open Innovation Center and the Accelerator?
Sure. So Samsung Ventures is a large entity. It has a long operating history. They do invest in the US. They tend to invest bigger checks, and they tend to invest later stage. And so Samsung Ventures, the brand that folks in this room probably know, is Series B and later, and bigger check sizes. Our group is seed stage and Series A with smaller check sizes, like I said, 500,000 to 3 million. But we coordinate very closely with Samsung Ventures. And
might they invest at the later stage in accelerator companies?
Yeah, so I mean, the Open Innovation Center Investing Fund hasn't been around as long, but as soon as those companies would want to raise follow-on money, Samsung Ventures would be a natural investor.
And can you give us a general idea of the pace of investment that's expected for the Innovation Center and the venture arm?
Yeah. So not speaking about Samsung Ventures, just Open Innovation Center. We target about 10 investments every year, maybe a few more, maybe a few less, but that's the general pace.
And then how do entrepreneurs become involved? Do they apply to you? Do you go out and find them, or is it a combination? And are you seeking more entrepreneurs or startups?
This is for Accelerator?
Yes.
Okay. So for Accelerator, we always figured that M&A would fuel part of the staffing of the Accelerator. So back to the goldfish analogy. The majority of what we've done to date, though, is actually hire extremely talented entrepreneurs as basically CEOs of these individual companies. We give them a budget, and they go out and hire their teams autonomously. The way we find those entrepreneurs is partly through our network, partly through people coming to us, but the quote-unquote interview process, or maybe funding process, I describe to people as it's somewhere between a job interview, because they're not really taking jobs, right? They're coming to build products, and a Series A, because it's not really a Series A either, because the idea is what we think will happen is that hopefully many of these products will succeed, but certainly some of them will not. But if we've done a good job hiring, instead of these teams leaving the accelerator altogether, they'll just be reconstituted into a new product. There may have just been a market mismatch when they were working on it, but if we're hiring talented people, we want to keep those people in the accelerator to keep working on products. Because really, again, going back to what I said early on, the notion of the accelerator is how do we get into the fabric of Silicon Valley, attract the best people. And so if you think about other great companies in Silicon Valley, or iconic companies, talented engineers and product managers move from product to product. And you can imagine the same thing happening in our accelerator.
Interesting. I wanted to also ask an M&A question. So Samsung has a history of making a moderate number of acquisitions of US technology companies, but you haven't been a heavy acquirer here, particularly considering how large a company Samsung is. So I was curious about what are thoughts on M&A going forward? Can we expect Samsung to be more active?
Yeah, I think so. I think we want to be opportunistic. I think the accelerator is one place where we can be opportunistic, but I think the business units inside Samsung have also recognized that there may be a need to fill gaps through more acquisitions, specifically in software. One anecdote is, so when I first started at Samsung, David, who I mentioned before, who preceded me by about 2 months, when I joined, he said, hey, we're going to do a road trip to Silicon Valley. I thought, okay, road trip, I don't quite know what that means. What we ended up doing was taking a number of top executives from Korea, bringing them here. And instead of them going into conference rooms and doing term sheet negotiations or technology diligence or whatever it might be, we went and visited these companies, and we saw things like on the Facebook wall, fail quickly, or don't be afraid to fail. What would you do if you weren't afraid? There were a lot of things. Phil Libin at Evernote gives his employees unlimited vacation and actually pays them $1,000, I think, to take vacation. And one session we had was over at Google, where they talked about acquisitions is not a sort of optional thing. It's actually very core to their business. And in fact, if more than, I forget the exact number, but if more than 2/3 are successful, actually the head of M&A is deemed to be a bit of a failure because he hasn't taken enough risks. And so I think one of the things that happened when we all kind of finished this trip was, one, I think, a lot more excitement about things like Open Innovation Center. And in fact, that probably started the path to beginning it. But I think also this acknowledgement that M&A is actually a critical part of a business process and not really an optional component.
We have a few minutes left, and of course I've got lots more questions, but I wanted to open it up to you all to see if there are some audience questions for Marc. Anybody out there?
I can also give business cards after the session.
Oh, we got one.
Hi. Does this work? Yeah. So I was wondering how much equity and or control do these entrepreneurs get, and what are the thresholds? I mean, do they work on this for a year, and then you, if it works, great. If not, you shut them down and you like reposition them or something?
Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I probably didn't clarify enough about the model of the accelerator. So the trade-off of having funding only from Samsung and actually every employee getting a salary and not a startup salary and not a friends and family round salary, but actually a pretty full salary, is Samsung owns the company. So much like I don't have equity in Samsung just because of general, that's the way they compensate, these employees of the accelerator also do not have equity in these companies. So they're really running product teams. Now, I will say, in a successful model, we certainly think that the vast majority of companies and products will end up inside Samsung business units. That's why we're doing this, right? To make this valuable for Samsung and for our products. We do think that there may be situations where a product doesn't have a natural fit in a business unit, but is actually could be a great company. In those cases, I think we would consider something like a spin-out. In terms of timing of companies and how much time we would give them to succeed, we've thought about it a little bit in sort of a milestone-based approach, right? So when someone starts, they really get usually the equivalent of 3 to 6 months of funding, right? And then we're doing frequent product reviews, and that funding will either go up or stay the same based on that. But quite frankly, if the product is not succeeding, if it's not resonating with the market, I think we'll be pretty quick to reconstitute the team and probably double down on winners while cutting ones that we don't think have as much promise.
We probably have time for one more question if there is.
Anybody?
Oh.
The question was how many of the applications on the Galaxy Gear came from the accelerator. All of the applications were third-party partners on Gear. And that's not because no accelerator product was appropriate or, well, the answer was they weren't ready, right? Because we just haven't been up and running long enough with the accelerator. But the expectation would be that things like Gear would certainly have accelerator products.
Let's see.
Yeah, I think, are the speakers for the next session all here? Okay, well, thank you very much to Marc and Joanne for moderating, and we really appreciate it. I hope this has been good insights for all of us, and let's give them a hand.